Hey, it's Danny from projectmanaverse.com, helping project managers to deliver on time and to budget. And in this video, you're going to learn the 6-point test phase criteria checklist. So you're going to use this checklist before you start your testing phase to make sure everything is lined up before you go. Now, the testing phase on an IT project is really, really important, and it's usually the phase where most issues can occur. It's hard to predict how long it's going to take. You can plan it perfectly, but there are issues that crop up that you can't always predict, and it's usually the testing phase that gets pushed out to the right in terms of end dates and milestones. And by extension, that can also push out your ultimate go live date. So you want to do everything you can to make sure you nail the testing, get it right. And this checklist will help you to prepare for that so you can hit the ground running when you start your testing. So let me jump into the checklist. Number one is to make sure that you put together some kind of entry criteria to starting the testing. And some of these points that I'm going to go through later will actually form part of your criteria, but make sure you agree that with your stakeholders. Make sure you are very clear on what needs to happen before you can start your testing, and then you can start getting ready for it and tracking that criteria before you actually start. So make sure that's all in place, it's agreed with all your stakeholders, you're monitoring it a few weeks ahead of your testing start date, and then when the day comes or the day before the day comes, you can get together with all your stakeholders, review that criteria, make sure everything has been ticked so you're ready to go. Okay, that's number one. Number two is to make sure that all the resources that you need are going to be in place. So all your testing resources. What you really want to do is engage your testing resources as soon as possible. So as soon as you start your project and you know what the scope is and you start to think about testing and a master test plan, you want to be thinking about who is going to be doing the testing, especially the user acceptance testing, where you've got people in the business who are actually testing the application or the software for you. You want to make sure you thought about who's going to do it, engage them early and get them lined up, because it's not always easy to get that testing resource secure, especially if that resource has a day job to do as well. They've got BAU to do. And sometimes they might have to get some backfill for their role so they can dedicate their time to support you on your project. So make sure you've got all your resources lined up, not just the testers, but all the engineering resources or the test managers, the QEs, anyone else you might need. Make sure they're all lined up and they've committed to supporting the test lines that are going to be within your test plan. So that's number two. Number three is make sure you have all the system access sorted for all the people that are going to be doing the testing. So not just access to the application that you're upgrading or you're changing and you're testing, but also access to any defect management software or any other kind of software that supports the testing process for tracking and management. So make sure all that's done in advance. This happens time and time again in testing. You'll get to day one of your testing phase, people will go to start their testing and they can't log into the system for whatever reason. So make sure that's done way in advance, where everyone's proven they can log in and access the systems that they need to access before the system phase actually starts. So that's number three. Number four is make sure you have a proper schedule of all your tests and when they're going to happen. So you need to be very clear at the start what testing needs to be done. That testing needs to be broken down into specific tests, or test scripts we call them. And then each script should have an owner, and then each script should be planned to happen on a certain date and a certain time. So you should have a nice schedule. Every day you can see what tests are due to happen, who's doing them. So that way you can actually track your progress and see if you're on track or you're behind schedule or ahead of schedule. Without that, it's very difficult to know if you're going to hit your end of test date. So you need to have that schedule in place, because then you can very easily see if you're not going to make it, if you are going to make it. And if you start to fall behind, you can take some mitigating actions to get things back on track, be that cutting down scope, or be it bringing in more resource or doing weekend working or extra hours. So it's really important that you have that detailed day by day test schedule of all the test scripts. Okay, number five is to establish and agree and document and socialize a robust defect process. So when you get a defect, what do you do? What's the process? So how do you know if something is a defect? Do you have a triage call every day to get together and discuss the issue to confirm whether it is really a defect or just a process issue. And once you've established it is a defect, what happens then? Who raises a defect on the system? Then who does it go to? How often do you review them? How do you prioritize your defects? What's your criteria for ranking the severity and the priority of the defect? All these little things you need to make sure you've got clearly documented, and all the roles and responsibilities are clearly documented as well. So everyone knows who's doing what. So when push comes to shove, there's no ambiguity and everyone's very clear. And if there are any questions, you can just point them straight to that defect process. Okay, number 6 is roles and responsibilities. So it kind of ties into defect management, but it's across the board with testing. What is everyone's roles and responsibilities? Who's responsible for doing the actual execution of the scripts? Who's responsible for coordinating all the handoffs and the testing between the engineers and the business people and the QEs? Who's kind of managing and pushing it forward? Who's updating the defects? Who's responsible for deciding the severity of a defect? Who is responsible for deciding if a defect can be lived with, or if you're going to go live without fixing it? Who's responsible for working out any workarounds for any defects? So all these roles and responsibilities need to be very well established up front and documented, and again socialized and sent out so you're ready when you start your testing. So there's your checklist. I'll go through it one more time and then we'll call it a day. So number 1 is make sure you have clear entry criteria for starting your test phase. And as a little bonus tip as well, you could probably have an exit criteria as well. So not only do you know what needs to happen before you can start your testing, you need to know exactly what has to have happened before you can say the testing is complete. Number 1. Number 2 is make sure all your resources are lined or all lined up and they're all ready to go. Number 3 is make sure everyone has access to all the systems they need to have access to. And number 4 is make sure you've got a detailed schedule of all the tests and what day they're going to happen so you can track progress. Number 5, make sure you've got your defect management process well documented. And number 6, make sure you've got all roles and responsibilities for anyone involved in the testing and also stakeholders who are very interested in the testing. That's all established and documented as well. Okay, that's the video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to give it a thumbs up, and until the next time, please take care.